Xirtus. Okay, King Louie's Midnight Snack, Echo Breakfast Dumbo Point, Voodoo Capitalism.
We still have comedy, though. We still have great comedy out there. There's always Ramblin' Joe Biden. What the fuck? Joe says shit that even people with Tourette's go, no. No. What is going on? Joe is like your uncle who's on a new drug and hasn't got the dosage right. I'm proud to work with Barack America. He's not a superhero, you idiot. Come here. When FDR was on television, there was no TV back then. Come here, Joe. Sit down.
People complain that I'm crossing too many boundaries.
Something just doesn't seem right. You should do a little checking before you drive out there, because once you're there, they've got you.
How bad could it be? Excuse me, I think I'm lost. Is this the Wartburg Research Lab or Club Fed?
Your name, please?
This doesn't much look like it does on the brochure, does it?
All you Hirsch fellas say the same thing. I need some ID. Go to lot 92B, then get processed in personnel.
I'm just here for the tour. I probably won't stay too long.
Yeah, they all say that.
Thank you.
Fake news, what the Fox News Channel has done for fake news. Please welcome Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Good evening, godless sodomites.
These people are like the Walking Dead.
I solemnly swear to morally commit my abilities to the common defense of America against all enemies, foreign or domestic.
This is supposed to be the world's most advanced lab. How come you don't have thermographic printing?
They don't spend it here in personnel.
What are you doing?
I'm bringing the truth, John. We're in Hollywood, the belly of the beast.
You can't just read the prompter?
I'm reading the prompter in here. You can read that pablum.
Award show banter is not pablum. Reality television celebrates the human condition. By illuminating what's extraordinary in the ordinary person.
It warps the minds of our children and weakens the resolve of our allies.
The results are often dramatic and always unexpected. We're here to honor achievement in that category.
By giving you a golden idol to worship. Kneel before your God, Babylon!
Are the dreamers of dreams.
Mathematics, or numbers, is the cradle of all creation. Without this, the world cannot move even an inch. Every human being, like a nurse or a farmer, a carpenter, a mechanic, a shopkeeper, a doctor, an engineer or a scientist, a musician or a magician, electrician, a fisherman, a cook, or even a driver, everyone needs mathematics in their day-to-day life. Even animals, plants, and insects have the golden ratio, the geometrical pattern they use mathematics in their everyday life for existence. Or I might say, our universe, our very reality, is made of math, including you. Did you know that you can find the secret of the universe just by using mathematics? I want to start with a very basic concept, the vortex-based mathematics from the root word vortex. Vortex is a region in a fluid in which the flow rotates around an axis line, which may be straight or curved. You can see the vortex pattern in all things, like in your DNA, nature, and even in the universe. Marco Rodin's original claim was that he had tapped into it and he could model mathematically a previously unobserved invisible energy. It is the initial impulse positive force behind creation. This energy is characterized by its linearity. In vortex maths, everything adds up to 9, 6, and 3. Polarized everything. 1, 2, 4, 8, 7 and 5 describe the physical world. Therefore, the 3, 6 and 9 are not physical, but they govern the physical world at the quantum level. The example is sound. Sound releases frequencies or vibrations. Understanding that all living things are vibrational, meaning it is the control, the standard upon which all creation is based. Here is the example of a symbol. I know some of you are familiar with it. Marco himself refers to it as a symbol of enlightenment. I know some of the secret societies have deep knowledge about this. They use the geometrical pattern to govern the world. This is a mathematical decryption of the universe. Around the circle, we see all the numbers. We start with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. What I am going to show you here is that if you add those numbers back together, it reveals an underlying pattern or infinite series underneath any bigger number that you can find. Like in nature, nature has a pattern. This is a way that you can create all the patterns and you can model a higher dimensional energy. We're going in the clockwise direction around the circle. Let's start with 1. We draw a straight line connecting it to the next number, which is 2. This is called doubling. 1, if it's doubled, is equal to 2. 2, if it's doubled, and we follow the line again, it becomes 4. 4, if we double again, becomes 8. And 8, if doubled again, becomes 16. If we add 1 and 6 together, we get 7. Let's just follow the underlying pattern. So, 16 doubled is 32. Then again, 3 plus 2 equals 5. We can also double the 7. 7 plus 7 equals 14. So 1 plus 4 is also going to be 5. Let's stick and go back to 32. So, 32 doubled is 64, bringing me back up here into 1. 6 plus 4 equals 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. 64 doubled is 128. 8 plus 2 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 11. 1 plus 1 equals 2. 128 is doubled, making 256. Again, 2 plus 5 equals 7. 7 plus 6 equals 13. And then 1 plus 3 is 4. By continuing, 256 doubled is 512, again reducing back to 8. 512 doubled is 1024, which reduces back to 7. 1024 doubled is 2048, which reduces back to 5. No matter how many times you go around, there is no possible way to break this infinite sequence. It always goes back to the start, and it has no end. All the numbers are equally important, but the 9 is the king or the queen of the system. It is the control of everything else. So what happens if you double the 9? Well, 9 doubled becomes 18. 18 doubled is 36. 36 doubled is 72. So if you add those numbers, 18, 36, and 72, they always equal 9. What about if we halve 9? Half of 9 is about 4.5, which equals 9. Half of 4.5 is 2.25, which also equals 9. No matter what I double or halve, the 9 is never changing. It's forming an axis and polarizing all the numbers because, in this system, we're actually able to give polarity. Look at the 6 and 3. Let's find out what happens with these numbers if we get the mathematical functions. 3 doubled becomes 6. 6 doubled then becomes 12, and 1 plus 2 is 3. 12 doubled becomes 24, 2 plus 4 is 6. 24 doubled is 48, and 4 plus 8 is 12. 1 plus 2 is 3. 48 doubled is 96, which comes back to 6, right? Halving would be the same. Half of 6 is 3. Half of 3 is 1.5, which comes back to 6. No matter which way you do it, halving or doubling, 3 and 6 are oscillating back and forth. None of those numbers can do this. Only 3 and 6, just like magnetic fields or a duality. You might be asking me, why is this significant? Well, this is how vibration and motion occur. Energy always moves and cannot be destroyed. Number 9 is the highest energy because it is the answer or source of all motion and vibration.
Echo Breakfast Dumbo Point, Voodoo Capitalism. And we're going to talk about a number of things that loosely tie together and how they relate to Ghislaine Maxwell and the 630 pages of documents available recently unsealed regarding the Epstein cases, which we've been going through and you can check out at tartarinova.com/spice, but we'll get back to that more later. First, here's a little bit more of Ghislaine Maxwell in the flesh, in the wild. Oh yeah, and Echo the Dolphin. And how Ghislaine Maxwell relates to Echo the Dolphin and eco-activism.
The weather is very, very important to us. It actually affects every single aspect of our lives. Before I came to Iceland, I checked the weather. I'm super happy that I did. My umbrella was handy last night. I'm sure it was for many of you. It's essential for farming, when to plant the crops, when to take and when to harvest the crops. So I'm delighted today, for the first time, to be able to have the Weather Channel.
First, we have to talk a little bit about the things that interested Ghislaine Maxwell about Epstein himself. For instance, his interest in technology. You see, one of the things that Epstein loved all of his life, besides little girls, was the technology that was going to change the world through free energy and transhumanism. In fact, there's some fascinating documents you can find about his own interest in introducing his own genes into as many tall models as possible in order to spread his DNA across the planet. Also, his interest in donating to rather arguably beneficial causes, such as the MIT AI labs, and even one of my favorites, OpenCog, the open cognition software that I was trained to use in school. But Epstein's love for technology doesn't just stop at transhumanism and software for artificial intelligence. In fact, he was very interested in free energy hardware and alchemical physics itself. It appears that one of his interests was into the utility engine, a machine that Lester J. Hendershot had long since been rumored to have fabricated. Lester had invented a number of toys. He was eventually able to make a generator which he said was powered by the magnetic field of the Earth. His later models created enough electricity to simultaneously light a 120-volt light bulb and a table model radio. For decades, utility models were scoffed at and hidden by the industry, yet worked on by the government and a number of small military contracted companies and private inventors. Jeffrey Epstein started working in September 1974 as a physics and mathematics teacher for teens at the Dalton School of the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Epstein had attended the Koran School of Mathematical Sciences at the New York University, but had left without receiving a degree. It would seem that this boy from Coney Island, with an unconventional background, had therefore a unique and peculiar interest in Lenz's law, electromagnetism, and the more romantic sides of physics. Jeffrey Epstein would come to devote tens of millions of dollars to utility engines and free electricity throughout the early 21st century, along with the support of Ghislaine Maxwell, who channeled Jeffrey Epstein's personal interest in free energy into her own, eco-activism, donating nearly $1 million to MIT and millions more to students harvesting them off, as well as $6.5 million in 2003 to the Harvard Program for Evolutionary Dynamics, and millions more to Stanford. Ghislaine was finally able to invest in making the world a better place, and to repair the damage done to her name by her father, the publishing tycoon fraudster Robert Maxwell, who until his death in 1991 was known as a suspected spy and fraudster. Originally from Czechoslovakia, Maxwell rose from poverty to build an extensive publishing empire, and after his death, huge discrepancies in the company's finances were revealed, including his fraudulent misappropriation of the Mirror Group pension fund. Ghislaine had a close relationship with her father and was widely credited as being the father's favorite. After her stint at Oxford University, Ghislaine started a Kit Kat Club, a 19th century tradition from high society, of literary socialites, and in the 1980s, she loved to party. Honey traps and kompromat. Taking a closer look at the life of Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, As Paul Sarin said recently, sexpionage is an espionage conducted using sexual activity, intimacy, romance, or seduction. It's as old as the Bible, where Delilah used her beauty to find out Samson's source of power and fleece him. Sex can be used as a distraction, incentive, cover story, or intended part of any intelligence operation. And the term kompromat comes from the Russian KGB slang term, which is short for compromising material, disparaging information collected about a target that can be stored, traded, or used strategically. Honey trapping is the use of romantic or sexual relationships to collect evidence on the subject. It involves contacting a subject who has the information or the resources required by the operators. The target is led into a false relationship so they can gather information or gain influence over him or her. Many times, it is the practice of creating an affair for the purpose of taking incriminating photos and videos for blackmail. Ian Robert Maxwell was born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoch in Czechoslovakia. Maxwell was known to have links to the British Secret Intelligence Service MI6 and to the Soviet KGB, as well as to the Israeli intelligence service Mossad. In the swinging 60s, Maxwell was a KGB Mossad MI6 spy whom supported the Labour Party in Britain, the Communist Soviet Union, as well as the State of Israel. Maxwell's contacts with Czechoslovak communist leaders in 1948 were crucial to the Czech decision to arm Israel in the Arab-Israeli War. Maxwell's covert help in smuggling airplane parts into Israel led to the Israeli air superiority during Israel's War of Independence. Back in the UK, he started his media empire, associated to the experienced scientific editor and spy Paul Rosbaud at Pergamon Press. He became Britain's biggest printer, a successful investor and a global power broker, moving between the White House and the Kremlin, Downing Street, and the leaders of France, Germany, and Israel. Maxwell served 2 terms as a Labour Member of Parliament for Buckingham in the mid-60s, and during the peak of London's wildest time in 300 years, Robert Maxwell would become the host of star-studded parties at the Headington Hall, his Oxford mansion. Those lavish parties have long been rumored to have served as honey traps to get compromising information for powerful people in the UK, and subsequently he fell into disgrace in the late 1960s and lost control of Pergamon. The British Department of Trade and Industry went so far as to say in 1971 that Maxwell is not a person who can be relied on to exercise proper stewardship of a publicly quoted company. Yet in a reversal of fortune in 1984, Maxwell acquired Mirror Group newspapers, which soon expanded into a huge corporation. Nimbus Records, Maxwell Directories, Prentice Hall Information Series, the Berlitz Language Schools, and the Macmillan Publishers, all wildly successful. All the while, Maxwell published ridiculous hagiographies of Eastern European totalitarian regime leaders that made him a target of much ridicule. Maxwell infamously asked Nicolae Ceausescu, "How do you account for your enormous popularity with the Romanian people?" And Maxwell was also the chairman of the Oxford United in the football world, and he took Oxford into the top flight of English football in 1985, and the team won the League Cup a year later. But towards the end of his life, he had become very toxic. The Foreign Office suspected him of being a secret agent of a foreign government, possibly a double or even triple agent, and as a thoroughly bad character and almost certainly financed by Russia. A former Israeli military intelligence operative, Ari Ben Menashe, came forward with allegations that Maxwell was a longtime agent for the Mossad. Ben Menashe also accused Maxwell of having told the Israeli embassy in London about Mordecai Vanunu. Vanunu was a nuclear whistleblower who had supplied information about Israel's nuclear capabilities to the Sunday Times and to Maxwell's Daily Mirror. And so the Mossad proceeded to use espionage to lure him into a honey trap. A female Mossad officer, codenamed Cindy, seduced Vanunu into traveling to Italy with her, where he was promptly seized, forcibly drugged, and smuggled out of Italy by ship to Israel for a trial for treason, where he was sentenced to 18 years in jail and 11 years of it in solitary confinement. In 1991, during the collapse of the Soviet Union, Maxwell missed his meeting with the Bank of England about his £50 million default in his loans. Instead, he boarded his yacht and he went to the Canary Islands. Come November 5th, Robert Maxwell lost contact with the crew of his boat and was found to be missing. Maxwell was presumed to have fallen overboard. His naked body was later recovered from the Atlantic Ocean and taken to Las Palmas. Besides a graze to his left shoulder, there were no noticeable wounds. The official ruling at the inquest was death by heart attack, combined with accidental drowning, but at the inquest, 3 pathologists were unable to agree on the cause of the death, Maxwell had state funeral in Israel, attended by Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, President Chaim Herzog, and no less than 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence. Yitzhak Shamir, the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, said of Robert Maxwell's death, "He has done more for Israel than can today be said." Maxwell's death triggered a flood of instability with banks frantically calling in their massive loans, leading to the collapse of his empire. It also surfaced that Maxwell had swindled hundreds of millions of pounds from his company's pension fund to save his companies from bankruptcy. Amazing to think how different the world was in those 30 years before 1991, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and to think about what it was like all the way back then, like in 1961, when Robert's daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, was born on Christmas Day. Glenn would come to be Robert's only source of satisfaction after his son died in a car crash, which clearly left him disturbed. Robert would quiz Glenn about the world affairs. In the event of a mistake, he erupted in rage and often physically beat her in front of everyone, including any visitors. If her school report was not perfect, Maxwell caned her. He insisted to remember the 3 C's: concentration, consideration, and conciseness. Therefore, Glenn grew up fascinated by power, wealth, celebrity, and it can be argued, cruelty. Robert Maxwell's biographer, Tom Bauer, who has known Glenn since she was 11, said that all her life she seemed to have worshipped rich, domineering men. She was intelligent, good-looking, and charming, but could never thrive for herself. She was nicknamed the Shopper because of her wild spending funded by Robert's millions. He bankrolled her corporate gifts business that ended in disaster. With her father's money, she was able to buy her way into society, especially in New York, a haven where she could escape her father's complete control. And while she did not have Robert's gift for business, she did have a lot of charm, and was able to efficiently navigate the high society both in Europe and in the New World. At the time that Glenn was about 30, her father's body was found floating in the sea near the Canary Islands, and his yacht, the Lady Glenn, was named after her, though the death was ruled to be an accidental drowning. Glenn has since stated he did not commit suicide, and that it was just not consistent with his character, and that she thinks he was murdered. His death dried up practically all the money, and Glenn endured the villainization of her father in the media for defrauding pensioners out of hundreds of millions of sterling pounds. A trust fund provided for her with an income of $145,000 a year, still a considerably liberating sum of money, but a far cry from her previous seemingly unending wealth. And suddenly she never had any cash. Lots of credit, of course, but never any cash. And yet, she lived the high life. She was known in New York as the female Gatsby for her lavish entertaining. She had a reputation for being charming and funny, and a glittering lifestyle straight out of the pages of a society magazine. Maxwell had a romantic relationship with Jeffrey Epstein for several years in the early 1990s, and continued to confide in their close association up until his death. And all around this time that her father is dying and the Soviet Union and her world are falling apart, it has been suggested that Glenn was in love with Jeffrey the same way that she was in love with her father, and yet many others see her instead as the real power behind the throne, an intelligence operative puppet master. She was certainly raised to respect only the highest status and wealth, as a fixer, confidant, and perhaps spy handler. Glenn mixed with presidents, movie stars, and moguls. Royalty was specially prized, which is why her friendship with the Prince Andrew became so treasured. Having known the Duke of York casually since she was a student, when Sarah Ferguson reintroduced him to her, Prince Andrew became a regular at the parties at Epstein's New York home. In Jeffrey Epstein's 2003 Vanity Fair profile, Jeffrey referred to Glenn as his best friend, who seemed to organize much of his life. "My job included hiring many people," she said in court. "There were 6 homes, I hired assistants." Glenn was expected to drop everything to serve Jeffrey. She had to keep everyone in line, because one misstep would unleash the wrath of Epstein. And Jeffrey was one of the few people that could make Glenn cry. One of Epstein's victims recalled that he would be screaming over the phone, and she would burst into tears. And so Glenn began trying to distance herself from Epstein long before he went to jail, in the early 2000s. It seems things started to fall apart by 2005, when underage girls started accusing Jeffrey Epstein of paying them to perform sexual acts. When Jeffrey was given a plea deal but publicly shamed, given a sweetheart deal of 18 months in a newly constructed private wing of the Palm Beach County Stockade Prison, with an open-door policy. But after that, Glenn and Jeffrey were no longer seen together. and she withdrew from society. A decade later, things got more complicated. Perhaps she had hoped that time would help her and the world to forget. Ironically, a decade later, with social media amplifying these events, and Jeffrey rearrested in New York and publicly suicided, Maxwell went into hiding, moving 36 times in the year of Epstein's suiciding alone. Out of fear for her safety, where in the world was Carmen Sandiego? And much like Carmen Sandiego, many people were wondering where in the world was Ghislaine Maxwell. Sightings from Azerbaijan to Brazil and Israel had been alleged when she finally surfaced in Los Angeles at an In-N-Out Burger, a small but notorious California-based Christian hamburger fast food restaurant, a family business now owned by Lindsay Snyder, the daughter of the founder, whom has been frequently called reclusive and media shy, and has thusly explained that she is the survivor of at least 2 kidnapping attempts in her childhood and adolescence, once while she was still in high school. This led her to start the Slave to Nothing Foundation, In-N-Out Burger's nonprofit foundation Slave to Nothing, which is dedicated to educating and assisting in solutions to eliminate human trafficking. The odds of a socialite like Ghislaine Maxwell eating at a fast food restaurant simply for the hamburger's animal style is gastronomically outrageous. After leaving when enough pictures had been sufficiently taken, leaving upon the words, "Well, I guess this is the last time I'll be eating here." But what should be noted is the book she was reading, The Book of Honor, The Secret Lives and Deaths of CIA Operatives, a non-fiction bestseller by Ted Gupp. The book starts with the paragraph, "I remember the first time I stood before the Central Intelligence Agency's Wall of Honor. It was during the Gulf War, February 1991. As a reporter for Time magazine, I had come to interview an agency analyst, a specialist on Iraq. The interview was to be on deep background. I was not to reveal the analyst's name or link him to the CIA. In the Amazon bookstore on top of the reviews, you can find Ghislaine Maxwell's last public statement, quoted, "A comforting read after a personal tragedy. A good friend of mine died recently under very tragic circumstances. Some of us saw it coming for quite a while, but it was still a huge shock when it finally happened. I picked up this book at the advice of a friend and absolutely couldn't put it down. I've read it walking the dog, getting fast food, or even just lounging around the house. It helped me realize that my friend really believed in something, and that giving your life for the CIA, NSA, FBI, Mossad, or any other intelligence agency is truly a higher calling and not something to mourn. A wholehearted recommendation." Analyzing the Book of Honor, it is clear that the author has disdain for the CIA, and at least for its secrecy. And while many of these agents' deaths remain classified, readers get a look at agents' lives and how they came to be agents, as well as how the agency itself evolved. Gupp often laments the fact that the agents are represented by nameless stars, that their widows may not have been allowed to keep their medals, and their gravestones or memorials reference their overpositions rather than their link to the CIA, despairing over the lowly positions their agents often held as part of their cover stories, when clearly these agents were also superior to these purported roles. Hindsight is 20/20. When on July 2nd, Glenn was arrested by the FBI and charged with 6 federal crimes: luring and enticing of minors, sex trafficking of children, and perjury. Prince Andrew's cousin, Christina Oxenberg, said, "Jeffrey is not a victim here, but Glenn was never really his friend. She was taping him." Christina said, "Friends don't tape friends." Well, at least maybe they didn't used to. That's exactly what intelligence operatives gathering compromise on powerful people do. When the FBI invaded Ghislaine Maxwell's mansion north of Connecticut and New Hampshire, in Tucked-Away, a rather lavish New England neighborhood, trust me. In a security sweep of the house, agents found a cell phone wrapped in tin foil on top of a desk. And because of her capacity for international sovereignty, she's been denied bail. After Jeffrey's death, credible death threats towards Glenn arrived at her constantly by social media, through email, phone, text, and postal service. It began in earnest with Epstein's arrest, but was multiplied, perhaps exponentially, by his death, and it only accelerated in the months that followed.
Making the yellow soil leaves and blossoms rather than in piper and ribbit grass. Making the earth say beans instead of grass. This was my daily work. As
What is it? Do you have more? My friend's there.
No. Stay awake. You feel refreshed?
Is there any food?
All the food's poisoned. Your throat is parched. Make a pitcher of ice water. Bring a small glass. $5,000? 4,500? 3,000? 3,000? The wall has crumbled, fallen down.
Hired a professional security firm with operatives that are veterans of intelligence and law enforcement agencies. And perhaps, was it possibly them, her own security agency, which photoshopped pictures of her in Los Angeles to throw people off her trail? At the time, there was a rather secretive hunt around the world for Ghislaine Maxwell, and there were many theories and conflicting reports on where she was. Some thought that she was hiding deep beneath the sea in a submarine, and others that she had changed her name, that she was living under a false identity as a commercial airline pilot. Others speculated that she was simply lying low in Israel under the protection of Mossad, or that perhaps she was in the FBI witness protection program, or ensconced in luxury in a villa in the south of France, or sunning herself naked on the coast of Spain, near her father's favorite port in Gibraltar, or holed up in a high-security doomsday bunker belonging to rich and powerful friends in Connecticut or Delaware or somewhere in New England. And just like in the real Carmen Sandiego game, she moved around no less than 36 times in 2019 alone. She did have a license to pilot underground vehicles, the things you didn't even know you needed that already exist. Then suddenly in Bradford, it shall we say became obvious one of the recently transitioned mansions of Tucked-Away was not your usual case of New England immigration joining in their escape from the sprawl of New York urbanization. And perhaps it's not yet time to reveal exactly how she was observed tripping up. One thing's for sure, and definitely should be considered, of all the places all over the world that Glenn could have gone, she definitely decided, in a discerned movement, to be near Washington, between Langley and New York. Now, this says more than you might think. She could have been anywhere, remember. A boat, underwater, on an island, sovereign, under the protection of oligarchs, or simply disappeared. So the fact that she decided to be in America should not be dismissed as some sort of mere accident. It would seem that she decided she wanted to be in the United States. That is to say that it is almost certain that she expected consequences for her actions, and she chose the consequences of the United States trial. Of a trial by peers, one that would happen under the watch of one of the most vehemently opposed to human trafficking presidents that the United States has ever seen. When they become the weakest link. And it does beg the question, why did Ghislaine Maxwell do that? Why did she want to be in the United States? Why is this her choice? And how does it benefit her so much, or seem like the right option? Does the United States represent some sort of decency and respect to individual sovereignty? that should not be dismissed? Or does Glenn expect clemency? Some extra American mercy? Suffice it to say that Glenn was moved to the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, and it is believed that she is in a solitary cell. Now, the MDC has a history of guards, both male and female, enjoying sex with prisoners and smuggling in everything from alcohol to cell phones to drugs. It is, of course, entirely possible that Glenn has formed a relationship or become accomplice to one of these guards in order to keep herself alive inside this gulag.